The driveway was lined with polished sedans and manicured hedges, trimmed into pointless perfection. I walked slowly toward the house I'd partially paid for, clutching the rosemary plant I'd brought as a housewarming gift. Callum always liked how it smelled in my kitchen. Or maybe he said that once. Politely. And I turned it into a memory. Inside. The place pulsed with chatter and string lights. Faces I didn't recognize. Glasses clinking, candles flickering on marble countertops. I spotted him near the back patio, laughing too hard. Gesturing towards someone across the kitchen island, I took a step closer. Then I heard it. There's the useless mom. His voice, my son's. Like he was commenting on the weather. I didn't breathe. My ears rang. I stood still. Stupidly still. Like stillness might erase what I'd just heard. Before I could make sense of it, Elise turned from a cluster of guests and locked eyes with me. Her lips curled into something that wasn't a smile. "Security," she said, loud enough for nearby heads to turn. "Get her out of here." She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. It was surgical. Rehearsed. The guard hesitated. He knew me. I'd given his wife a reference for a teaching job. But protocol won. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask." "It's fine," I said, my voice even. I placed the rosemary down on a side table and walked out. Each step quieter than the last. No one stopped me. Not even him, by the time the night air hit my face. I already knew what I had to do. The house was quiet when I got home. The kind of quiet that doesn't comfort, but confronts. I sat on the edge of the armchair I always chose. The one with the worn armrest from years of leaning into other people's problems. My purse slid to the floor, and I let it stay there. I thought about the rosemary still sitting on their marble counter. Unwatered. Unwanted. I'd picked it because Callum once told me, back when he still shared things with me, that the smell reminded him of childhood chicken soup nights, late study hours, home, when he moved into his first apartment. I wrote the check for the deposit without hesitation. He said he'd pay me back. I didn't care if he did. I just wanted to ease the weight off his shoulders so he could stand taller. Later, when tuition deadlines crept in faster than he could keep up with, I wired the money. Quietly. I even covered Elise's final semester so she wouldn't have to delay her graduation. They never asked, but they never stopped me, either. And when his app flopped and investors started pulling out, I pulled in $50,000, tucked into his account through my line of credit. He called once, breathless with panic. I transferred the funds that night. By morning, his crisis had passed, and he never brought it up again. I never asked for recognition. I didn't want parades or plaques. I just wanted a place at the table, a chair that said, "You mattered in how this all came together." But tonight, I saw what I really was in their eyes. Not a cornerstone. Not even a footnote. I stood, went to the filing cabinet, and pulled out the folder labeled Halden. Personal. I opened the office door and turned the lock behind me. Not out of fear, out of finality. No one had ever asked what I kept in these cabinets. They assumed it was recipes. Tax files. Maybe retirement paperwork. But it held the true record of what I gave. The folder was there. Middle drawer. Center tab. Halden. Personal. Inside photocopies of every check I'd written for Callum since he was 19. The down payment on his first condo. Wire receipts from when he studied abroad. Signed loan papers I'd co-signed when no bank would touch him during the market dip. I pulled out another folder labeled Joint Accounts. The savings fund I started when he and Elise said they wanted kids. The auto transfer I'd set up to pay their utility bills the year he wasn't drawing a salary. The trip to Maui I booked for their anniversary when they said they were too stressed to plan anything. I spread it all out on my desk. Not for show. Just so I could finally see the shape of it all in one place. What they owed me wasn't money. It was acknowledgement. But they couldn't give that. so I stopped asking. I picked up the phone. David, it's Loretta Halden. His voice perked up. Mrs. Halden, good evening. I need to freeze all joint accounts. Effective immediately. Anything with Callum or Elise's name on it. A pause. Understood. Is there a reason? There is. Also, I want to begin the process of liquidating the Halden Trust. Move it into a new vehicle under my name only. Another pause. Shorter this time. Yes. Ma'am, I'll initiate first thing in the morning. Next. I called Linda, our travel coordinator. Cancel every upcoming booking under the Halden household. All of it, but everything. I hung up, exhaled once, and gathered the documents into a fresh folder labeled Retained Holdings. The first call came at 11:14 p.m. I was still at the table, smoothing the corners of the folders I'd just labeled. The ink still fresh on the tabs. The screen lit up with Callum's name. I watched it until it went dark again. 3 minutes later, the second call, then another, no voicemail. Just a steady rhythm of silence trying to turn itself into noise. By the time I turned the phone over to face me, there were 9 missed calls. A message appeared, Mom. Are you okay? I think something's wrong with the accounts. My card isn't working. I didn't reply. Another call. Then a voicemail. Then Elise's name appeared. Loretta, we really need to talk. This might be a misunderstanding. Can we just reset? That word sat bitter in my mouth, as if I were a device to be restarted after a glitch, as if years of quiet giving could be rebooted with a polite request. I walked into the kitchen and made tea. Let the kettle scream before I turned off the burner. Let the mug steep too long. I drank it anyway. By midnight, the phone buzzed again. 17 missed calls. A new message from Callum. Is this because of what Elise said it was out of line? But come on. You know we didn't mean it. But they did. And even if they hadn't, they didn't stop it. I silenced the phone and left it on the windowsill. Outside, the garden hummed softly in the dark. The rosemary plant, still wrapped in the tissue paper I'd chosen so carefully, sat like an unopened apology on the patio bench. By morning, the number had climbed to 46. I looked at the last message. I'm sorry if you feel hurt, but freezing everything like this isn't fair. If I feel hurt, I deleted it. Then I opened my laptop and began logging into every account, renaming them one by one. I removed his access, erased the shared titles, and updated the ownership forms. With each confirmation, a small thread untied itself in my chest. I didn't answer the phone once, but I did answer something else. And it said, keep going. The knock came just after sunrise. I hadn't slept much. The night had been long, not restless, but filled with something sharp and alert. I'd spent most of it sorting through files, labeling folders, logging into accounts, moving everything that once had their names into places that now only held mine. It was Daphne at the door, holding a thermos and a grocery bag. I brought muffins, she said, stepping in, but mostly I came to see if you're still breathing. I smiled, barely. She poured us both a mug of the dark. Herbal tea she always makes. I don't know what's in it, some blend she grows herself, but it tastes like soil and comfort. We sat in the sunroom, surrounded by half-sorted papers. And she didn't flinch at the mess. You know, she said quietly. People always say you've lost your mind when you finally stop giving them what they never earned. I exhaled. She wasn't wrong. It's not madness. Loretta, she added, reaching for her mug. It's memory catching up with truth. We laughed, softly. It was the kind of laugh that doesn't carry joy so much as it releases pressure. She didn't ask what happened. She didn't need to. She's seen this before in other women. In herself, after she left. I returned to the office and began scanning every page I'd pulled. Contracts, transfers, letters, cards, everything that once marked my presence in their lives. Each click of the scanner felt like another step away from erasure, like evidence that I had existed not just as a helper or enabler, but as a builder. Then I called my attorney's office and scheduled a meeting to restructure my estate. I also called my bank and requested new account titles. I renamed the trust. It no longer bore the Halden name. I called it the Wren Foundation, after Daphne, because if someone was going to be honored in what I leave behind, it would be the woman who showed up without needing to be asked. Out in the garden, the rosemary I'd brought home from the party sat quietly on the bench. Its soil was still damp. I lifted it gently and brought it inside, placing it on the kitchen windowsill. From now on, whatever I grow plants, legacies, peace will root in soil I chose. I took the rosemary down from the window, needing the space for something else. I didn't know what yet, just that it needed clearing. While washing the pot in the sink, I found my mind drifting, not by force, but by muscle memory, to a different version of him. Callum at 7, curled in my lap during a thunderstorm, whispering, "It's too loud in the sky." I used to hum to cover the thunder, my cheek pressed to the top of his head until he stopped shaking. Callum at 10, trailing behind me in the grocery store, holding the shopping list with a sense of mission, double-checking prices like I'd taught him. Callum at 15, too cool to say I love you, but still setting the table when he saw I was tired. The boy who once spent a whole afternoon gluing leaves onto construction paper because he'd forgotten it was Mother's Day and wanted it to feel special anyway. He'd been tender once. Earnest. Not perfect, but real. I didn't know when the shift happened. Maybe it was slow, like paint peeling off a wall you stop noticing. Maybe it was a lease, or maybe he needed someone to push me further away so he wouldn't feel guilty when he did it himself. Or maybe I had always been temporary in his mind, necessary, but disposable. I stared at the leaf card still pinned to the corkboard near the back door. The colors had faded, the glue yellowing at the edges. I kept it there because it reminded me there had been love. Now I looked at it and wondered if I'd mistaken a phase for a promise. I felt the ache rise up the grief that doesn't come with death, but with recognition. I hadn't just lost my son. I'd lost the version of him I built my life around. And yet, the grief didn't flatten me. It clarified. I carried the card to my office and slid it gently into the back of the independent holdings folder. Not out of sentiment, just so I wouldn't forget who I'd raised and who he chose to become. Then I picked up the phone and called my lawyer. By the time Thursday arrived, I had everything I needed in one folder neatly tabbed, cross-referenced, and labeled. The woman who walked into Halden and Rios Legal was not the one who'd been escorted out of her son's house 5 days ago. My attorney, Miranda Espinoza, didn't ask why I was there. She'd seen it before. Too many women with quiet paper trails and invisible grief. I want to revise my will, I told her, and restructure the trust. It should no longer bear the Halden name. She nodded slowly. What do you want to call it? I hadn't planned on that part. My mouth opened and closed once. Then, clear as water, the Wren Foundation. A small smile tugged at Miranda's lips. After the bird, after the friend. I said, back home. I opened a new document and began to draft the letter. It wasn't emotional. It didn't need to be, to whom it may concern. This letter serves as formal notification that I, Loretta Elaine Halden, am initiating the dissolution of all financial co-accounts and revoking standing permissions granted to Callum James Halden and Elise May Halden, effective immediately. The Halden Family Trust will be terminated and reestablished as the Wren Foundation, with sole beneficiary rights retained and reassigned at my discretion. I listed the new accounts, named my successor trustee, and added a note to notify all institutions. I included a final paragraph stating the revised beneficiaries of my will, none of whom included Callum. I printed 3 copies, initialed each page, and slid them into stamped envelopes. As I sealed the last one, I felt the tension in my jaw loosen. The letter wasn't a threat. It was a boundary, a record that I had once believed in something, and then chose not to believe in it anymore. I left the envelopes on the hall table and stepped outside into the evening air. A breeze moved through the rosemary on the sill, bending it slightly toward the sun. He didn't knock. He just opened the gate and stood at the back door like he still had permission. "Can we talk?" he said. Not a greeting, more of a demand wrapped in a plea. I stepped aside and let him in. He didn't wait for tea. Didn't ask to sit. He paced, hands on his hips, face flushed from either heat or frustration. "Why would you do this?" he started. "How could you freeze the accounts, pull the trust, cancel the trip?" I sat at the kitchen table, my hands folded, because I was never on the guest list. "Callum? Just the invoice." His jaw tightened. "This isn't you. Mom, this is dramatic." I stood, walked to the office, and returned with a single folder. I placed it on the table between us. The label, written in my handwriting, "Proof you forgot me." He didn't open it. I did. "Tuition?" I said, flipping to the first tab. "Loan cosigns, business grants, tax payments, your down payment, Elise's car title, utility bills for the first apartment, babysitting costs." I never claimed. He stared, silent now. "You called me useless," I said, voice calm. "But you lived in a house I paid for, built a business I funded, and raised children I watched when no one else could." "I didn't mean it like that," he said. Quieter, "But you said it like that." I replied. The silence stretched. He reached for one of the papers, read it halfway, then let it fall. "You can't just erase us," he said. I shook my head. "I'm not erasing anyone. I'm just removing myself from where I was never seen." He left without slamming the door. The folder stayed on the table, open. I didn't close it. Instead, I picked up the pen beside it and began listing everything that would now belong to the Wren Foundation. Miranda slid the new documents across the table. Her pen tapped lightly against the notary seal as she waited for me to read. Everything was exactly as I'd asked. The house would go to the women's shelter on Pineview Drive. I used to donate there once a year, dropping off coats and canned goods. Now they'd have a permanent residence, something sturdy to house people finding their footing again. The Wren Foundation, newly incorporated, would fund scholarships for adult women returning to school, especially single mothers with no family support. I'd already earmarked the first recipient, Jessa, a young woman I'd mentored through the literacy program years ago. She was working nights, studying nursing by day, raising a boy who reminded me too much of a younger Callum. She always sent thank you notes, handwritten, my savings accounts, life insurance, and retirement funds were divided between these 2 pillars, a home for the forgotten, a future for the willing. Callum's name was nowhere. Not in a footnote. Not in an asterisk. At the end of the document, Miranda had inserted a clause I hadn't asked for, but welcomed a personal letter enclosed with the estate papers. To be delivered after my passing. Not vindictive, just clear. I signed each page slowly, pressing the pen to paper with steady hands. No hesitation, no rewrite. The ink dried without a smudge. When we finished, Miranda gathered the pages, clipped them into a leather binder, and locked them in her cabinet. "It's done," she said. It was outside her office. The street buzzed with its usual rhythm horns, conversations, crosswalks blinking. But inside me, everything had gone still in the best way. No guilt, no noise, just space. That night, back home, I walked into the garden and stood beside the rosemary. It had started to bloom. Tiny violet flowers tucked between the green. I reached down, broke off a small stem, and pressed it between the pages of my personal journal. In the morning, I would call the foundation board to schedule our first planning session. The mornings are different now. No alarms, no lists, no quiet dread of what I'll be asked to give next. I paint in the kitchen where the light is best. Nothing professional. Just slow strokes on small canvases. Herbs, rooftops, sometimes faces I remember in flashes. Faces that were kind. The rosemary has tripled in size since I brought it back inside. I've added thyme and sage to the windowsill. I dry what I don't use and bring bundles to the shelter on Thursdays. When I help serve lunch, Jessa comes by sometimes, smiling in her scrubs, her boy trailing behind her, curious about everything. There's a rhythm now, a gentle loop of giving that never empties me. The Wren Foundation is growing faster than I expected. We funded 5 scholarships this spring. One recipient sent a photo of her graduation cap, decorated with the words, "Because someone believed." I printed it and pinned it beside the old leaf card Callum made years ago. Both came from children. Only one still feels real. This morning, the phone buzzed. A message from a number I know by heart. "Mom, I miss you." No apology. No reflection. Just those 4 words sitting there like a stone. I stared at it for a long moment, then pressed delete. There are people who miss the version of me who never said no. I'm not her anymore. I put the phone down, tied back my hair, and stepped out into the garden. The late summer sun warmed my shoulders. The bees moved lazily between lavender stalks. For a moment, everything stood still, not from grief or anger, but from fullness. Inside, the kettle began to whistle. I turned back toward the house, the door still open behind me, the quiet waiting not as a burden, but as a welcome. And I realized I never needed to be invited to peace. I just had to stop apologizing for choosing it.
Did you enjoy my story? What a journey it has been. I truly wonder, what would you have done if you were in my shoes? Would you have chosen silence to keep the peace, or would you have done what I did to reclaim your dignity? Let's meet in the comments below. I'm so curious to hear your thoughts. I'm reading every single one. Which city are you listening from tonight? If my story resonated with you, you can support me and help me bring more stories like this to the world by sending a super thanks. Your sweet support means the world to me and allows me to continue this journey with all of you. On the screen now, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend you watch next. There are so many more on my channel, each with its own lessons and triumphs. Don't forget to subscribe and click the notification bell so you never miss a new chapter. Thank you for being here with me. Until the next story, with love and respect.